Hello, and good day to you, whatever part of the day it is to all of you, and welcome to this webinar on setting up multi-stakeholder processes for human security, common elements, and a case study, organized by the Improving Practice Group of GPPAC. This is our first webinar, so we're still piloting the process, and we really are grateful to you for your participation. Thank you. The team at this end consists of myself, Lucy Nasabi, and John and Pam and Nick. There should also be Gabriella, but she was unable to attend today. Hopefully she will join us for a few minutes at some stage. We are hoping that this will be the first of a series of webinars. This one is starting on human security because of the work that we have done on this during the past year at GPPAC, and because of the excellent GPPAC Human Security Handbook. We would be very interested in your feedback and suggestions about the webinar. The webinar will be in 3 parts. First of all, a presentation on the common elements and key considerations by John Rudy, who is a very experienced trainer as Senior Advisor for Human Security at the Alliance for Peacebuilding, and also Peacemaker in Residence at Elizabethtown College Center for Global Understanding and Peacebuilding. Then, second, we will have a case study from Zimbabwe, presented by Pamit Saithaka, who works as Community Cohesion Initiative Officer at the Ecumenical Church Leaders Forum, ECLF, and is also the Regional Liaison Officer for GPPAC for Southern Africa. Finally, there will be a question and answer session. In order to ask a question, you click on participants and then on the little pinkish hand on the screen. And otherwise, you can also send a question through chat. We will do our best to take all the questions. We will take them in the order in which we receive them. And you will be automatically muted for the duration of the webinar, but will be unmuted in order to ask your question. The session will be recorded, and anyone who is interested in receiving the recording or copies of the PowerPoint presentations, please send us your request by email. John and Pam will also put their email addresses so that you can contact them directly if you wish. So here, for now, is John to talk about common elements and key considerations in setting up multi-stakeholder processes for human security. Thank you, John.
Yeah, thank you, Lucy, and good day, everyone. I'm glad to see a few of us out there who are interested in this, this part of human security that takes different focus depending on where you are and what your context, what kinds of issues you are facing. I thought, first of all, I'd just go over the very basic definition of what human security is, as per our handbook and our understanding, our starting definition. So the UN approach to human security includes freedom from fear, freedom from want, and freedom to live in dignity, or freedom from indignity. And I think many of us in settings where there is ongoing violence and conflict will understand what each of these freedoms means in their context. And we can discuss that in the Q&A a little bit more if we need. Again, just contrasting state security and human security. For the state, you ask whose security is it, the nation state, the laws, the territorial integrity, are those kinds of considerations for state security. But for human security, we're talking about individuals, we're talking about communities. This is a people-first security that asks the question in terms of whose security. Well, it is for individuals, particularly referencing freedom from fear, freedom from want, and freedom from indignity. What threats are focused on in state security? Insurgents, disasters. This is a very basic and brief list. We could talk for hours about this. But when you come to human security, what is it that impacts individuals and communities most severely? Things like health and welfare, the violence that is very kinetic and very, very personalized, and then rights. We're thinking about rights. And again, this list could be much longer. And how is the security achieved? Well, in the nation state, ideally, it is a balance of military, economics, and diplomatic. Right now in the world, it seems like there is an overuse of militaristic force. The diplomatic, particularly for my own nation here in the U.S., our diplomatic initiatives are often second. In terms of human security, how is that achieved? This approach says that civil society and people on the ground know best about what their security concerns are and what is the most, what will bring them the most security. So just a very brief contrast there. So when we think about multi-stakeholder processes, we're thinking about 5 areas of coordination between the actors of state security and the actors of human security. And in terms of state security, for this presentation, we'll be focusing mainly on military and police in the state security sector. For our human security component, we'll focus mostly on some kind of civil society effort, whether that's non-governments, NGOs, local organizations, community-based organizations, and in multi-stakeholder processes, those meeting. So there are 5 areas in which we can coordinate these. For human security, the first is joint capacity building. What capacities are needed in order to achieve the kinds of security that we are looking for, the kinds of human security. The second would be then identifying what challenges. So this would include some kind of conflict analysis, conflict assessment. And if you can do that jointly, given the different approaches to security, this is one of the goals for that second Pearl point there, jointly identifying human security challenges. Joint conflict assessment, it can be a very rich exercise in uncovering the kinds of insecurities that communities face. The third Pearl point, jointly designing human security strategies then. Once you have a common analysis, it's very helpful to plan together and design how is it to best achieve those kinds of securities. Because remember, these state securities and human security, they have a lot of overlap. They have a lot of difference, but they do have a lot of common elements. And so these 5 areas of coordination are helping us get there. And jointly designing, and then fourthly, jointly implementing these kinds of strategies are some of the goals of this multi-stakeholder process. And finally, certainly we are doing monitoring and evaluation to see, are we getting the results we want in terms of security? So these 5 points are some of the areas of coordination for human security. So why do we do this multi-stakeholder process? The overall goal of this, of course, is relationship. Because the security sector, these sectors, whether it's the state security approach or the human security approach, often do not have any forum for conversation. And so relationship between these elements of security is a key goal for the coordination of multi-stakeholder processes. And of course, building trust, building common ground, building the connections it takes for communication. Transparency is a big one in areas where there's a lot of confusion, there's a lot of chaos going on because there's a lot of violence around. the transparency and communication is key in making sure that at least there's no counterproductive security kind of approaches. Preventing duplication of efforts is a big one. Again, in violent contexts where there's a lot of chaos, there's a lot of people doing interventions and a lot of things going on, the prevention of duplication is important, just so we can all use our resources in the most efficient and effective way. Protection of community-based organizations, local NGOs, and certainly international NGOs is a main reason, again, in very chaotic situations. And the last one that I'll highlight, and I'll just, for example, go into a little bit more detail. Civilian protection is one of the, can be one of the goals in multi-stakeholder processes. Why civilian protection? And again, I'm nuancing this one reason why we do a multi-stakeholder process. We have moral obligations. And of course, you know, all of the genocides, all of the mass atrocities that have been happening, we certainly need a greater sense of security, both in the state level and on the human security level. And so we do these processes so that we can address the protection of civilians from a moral standpoint, also from a legal standpoint. In my experience in the Philippines, on the ground soldiers often did not know of their obligations either for humanitarian law or even their own national legal frameworks. And so these multi-stakeholder processes can help to make transparent all of the legal obligations for civilian protection, as an example of why we do this. Political, again, political legitimacy is one of the main reasons for human insecurity. And so being able to coordinate can give us a political understanding of in the realm of protection of civilians. And also then strategic. We don't want to be at cross purposes with local communities. Ultimately, security depends on local people participating in their own security understandings. And let's see. So we would like to highlight to you the human security curriculum that is freely available. I will leave this slide up for the next minute or two as I turn this over to Pam. But want to highlight, if any of you have a QR code reader, you can quickly go to the website where you can download this handbook on human security. If you are doing anything in multi-stakeholder processes and a larger focus on human security. Also included in this resource pack is the local ownership in security. These are 40 case studies where human security actors and national security, state security actors have coordinated and have cooperated on various enterprises for gaining greater security. And lastly, then there's a policy brief that kind of summarizes all of this in a 4-page, very succinct document. So those are all free. And I think at this point, we'll hear a case study from Pam in Zimbabwe.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Pamidza Itaka from Ecumenical Church Leaders Forum in Zimbabwe. I just want to give a brief background about ECLF. Ecumenical Church Leaders Forum started in 2008 as a grouping of concerned Christian leaders from major ecumenical bodies, including the Zimbabwe Council of Churches, Zimbabwe Catholic Bishops' Conference, Union of the Development of Apostolic Churches in Zimbabwe and Africa, and the Evangelical Fellowship of Zimbabwe, who felt the need to meaningfully intervene in contemporary social, economic, and political issues affecting the people. from what John was saying about the issues of human security, it was really necessary for ECLF to come on board. And later in 2010, it was registered as a trust, and the church leadership and various consultations had to reflect on the practical role of the church in the context of a critical environment with political and socio-economic conditions that had left a hurting and traumatized nation. And out of that now, the Ecumenical Church Leaders Forum had to sit down and say, we have got a traumatized nation, we have got people who are hurting, people who are not secure, people who have lost their human security. How can we manage to make sure that people can actually work and do things within their communities? Then we started these programs called Conflict Prevention, Management, Resolution and Transformation, called CPMRT. Then within the communities, we go out, sensitize them on how they can manage conflicts, because we are saying they were in the midst of conflicts. Apparently, we are not in a war zone area, but we are saying the communities have been affected. And what is it that has been affected? Mainly in Zimbabwe is the economic security and the food security. People cannot actually come on board. There is totally some situations where people really need that. So these community members, once we have brought them together, we sensitize them at the end of a 3-day workshop or a 5-day workshop. They say to themselves, we have taught us more about peace building work. Now what we need is we want to remain with peace within our communities, sustain this peace, and then they will actually form what we call local peace committees. And these local peace committees, they continue within the communities, and they've got their own terms of references. So how do they come on board? These are chosen from eminent people. Some of them, they trust and hold offices. We have got women representatives, we have got young people, we have got religious leaders, traditional leaders, political leaders, and some people whom they deem fit necessary to be part of the local peace committees. And what do? They are the local peace infrastructure. They are there to promote peace, sustain the peace within the communities. And remember, this is about ownership. The communities now, they have found that peace, and now they are going to be facilitating the community dialogues and mediating in a non-violent way, and they will continue to raise the awareness for peaceful coexistence and building community cohesion. And they also act as early warning systems. John has talked about freedom of want. We are having freedom of dignity. They want that. So they will create that sense of ownership, and they want to now drive the processes within the communities. So the local peace committees have become a unique product within ECLF, who engage locals in community dialogues aimed at bringing conflict resolutions. So after some time, when we were working within the communities, we then had to introduce another program called Alternative Dispute Resolutions. And it was now a paradigm shift from CPMRT. Why did we bring it on board? This was aimed at strengthening and expanding local level mediation, dialogue and dispute resolution capacities by deepening the foundation of peace, dialogue and social cohesion in Zimbabwe. And this was initiated it started in 2016 to 2018. And we are hoping that it is going to be ending. It's a program. But then because the communities have already got the skills, they are going to be continuing with the program. This also is aiming at contributing or enhancing the resilience of communities against the disruptive disputes that are going to be there and the conflicts. And it's also aimed to reduce potential threats to national and community peace and social cohesion while improving the capacities for timely and structured response to disputes before they escalate to violence. Now, what sort of methodology do we use? We actually take the community members through a 5-day training for community peace facilitators and dialogue conveners. These would have actually been trained by ECLF at first, and then we bring them into this session so that we can actually capacitate them and nurture them so that they can support any peace dividends that they are having within the communities and community cohesion efforts. You are going to see at the end where the communities actually say now that they've got the peace, they cannot be afraid of anybody within the community. They are working peacefully. Remember, from the stakeholders that we are actually talking about, they have managed to engage different stakeholders, and now they are working as local peace committees. So they are now saying we are building some dividends like unity. We are having the communities able to work together. Where communities have been divided, like by political violence, like in our Zimbabwean situation, we have gone through some violent situations before. So people who can put away their differences and they will start to work towards building their communities. That's how we can actually harvest the peace dividends. And they also strengthen the capacity of the community members to serve as peace facilitators and dialogue conveners. So whenever there are conflicts within the communities, they actually come on board. And we also make sure there is an increase in the women and youth participation in peace building activities at community level. So how do they manage to do this? I've got a story of the most significant change that we actually encountered within our community. What we do is we are widespread the whole of Zimbabwe, but here I've chosen one particular ward in Matabele South region called Bidi area in Matobo. The community had faced some serious challenges over the years when it comes to mobilizing community members to participate in development projects. A number of NGOs had actually conducted capacity building training sessions and initiated fully funded non-income and income generating projects, but to date, a large proportion of these have ceased to function totally. In 2010, the communities were trained in lobby and advocacy with one organization, and with them, they had some community action plans that they aimed at actually developing some projects like a classroom block called Mavisi and a clinic in Hlupo. And initially, these projects kicked off with the communities participating enthusiastically, but to date, they have all died. Why? Because they had some conflicts within the areas. And how did ECLF manage to intervene? When we came now in 2016 with the CPMRT, the communities really appreciated and said, we have got all the skills, but minus conflict resolution. This is the reason why our projects were not continuing. So this training now resulted in the formation of the local peace committees, as I had said. And the local peace committees saw it then fit now to initiate a dialogue between the various community stakeholders so as to resolve the conflict and hopefully resuscitate the community projects. So they then started now with their community projects, and then they continued. And I want to mention one thing here, how significant or important was the change for an individual. We are talking of human security here, personal security, we are talking of the community security. The Kezi district lies in region 5 of the country and is typically characterized by low rainfall and limited access to safe water. When the community initially identified the construction of a dam as one of its development priorities, the objective was to alleviate water shortages, which see community members walking long distances in search of water, potable water, particularly during the dry season. Resumption of this dam construction is very significant in the sense that the community has decided to take tangible action to address what is a key challenge. Like I said, we are now looking at issues like food security. They were looking at water so that they can develop some community gardens and nutritional gardens so that they can actually address the issues of poverty and hunger. In the process, community relations have improved as the local peace committee facilitated open dialogues to address conflicts among the community members. It is these that improved the relationships that have allowed the community members to work together towards a common goal. What was the contribution made by the program which contributed to that change? The CPMRT trainings workshops encourage the people to open up and share their feelings or burdens, so as to allow them to go on to their to let go their anger or bitterness and heal. So in this case, we are saying where there are conflicts, people, they cannot work together. But the CPMRA workshops, they spoke to their hearts to open up and let go. Remember, this some of the areas, as I said, they really suffered from some political violence and a lot of issues that had happened in that area. So this can usually be facilitated through dialogues. So they learned those skills, they sat down together and they started to dialogue. And remember, I said within the local peace committee, they've got different stakeholders, the political parties, we have got the traditional leaders. So everybody's involved and they are engaging directly. The skills demonstrated by the local peace committee are what they learned in both the CPMRT and the alternative resolution workshop, how to convene a dialogue, how to mediate. And then these workshops now were actually helping them to facilitate the implementation of community cohesion initiatives. In addition, the knowledge on community cohesion projects gained by the local peace committee members during the ADR workshops has enabled them to refine their community plans, identify a priority project and development, an effective implementation strategy. This is one of the projects that they was talking about, the construction of a dam. They started, those are community members who are working on their own. We had to come in as ECLF just to give them a catalytic fund, like giving them some cement, but all the time the community members were working to make sure the stones are there from the nearby villages, the sand is there, everything, they were doing it on their own, different stakeholders. Immediately, they had completed their dam wall, water was collected, their animals were now getting water, the people were about to getting their gardens on board, but unfortunately, because of heavy rains, the dam wall was washed away. But then once that happened, it meant that they had not actually got everybody on board, to including the expertise. They were doing it because this is what they wanted as a community. But later on, like I said, in one accord, they were not discouraged after the dam was collected by water. They had to sit down again, now had to look for the different stakeholders who can actually help them to build their dam once more. This is where they are now. So with us as ECLF, peace dividends, we actually take note of peace when they come up with community cohesion projects that can address issues of human security. So I would like to call upon my colleagues if they can add on to something before we close off. I've got Suko here with me and Tabeth, if you can add before we close.
Afternoon, everyone. You'll find that what I have to highlight isn't specific to this one project, but we have community initiatives where we actually have state security agents who actually work together hand in hand with the community. For instance, in Zimbabwe, our military arm actually has personnel who are actually trained in various artisan skills, plumbing, construction, and there are communities who've managed to successfully engage them in assisting with such initiatives. So for ECLF, we actually feel that that's something that we can leverage on as we try and push the human security agenda. To say, even despite the fact that we are not in a conflict situation, if we have that relationship between security personnel and the communities, if we can get them actually reading from the same page in terms of human security, it could actually bode well in future for conflict management processes should the country end up in an armed conflict situation.
Thank you, Suko. So what she has actually highlighted is very critical, like we have been mentioning. So indeed, our human security, we are actually using it so widely spread. And from what John was saying, the human security booklet, it's not a one-size-fits-all. what we did were to extract some important issues that we thought could be really necessary. So for our 5-day program, we just picked a number of issues that we thought could actually help to make sure the communities, when they are setting up their multi-stakeholders programs, they can actually follow. Like, for example, you talk in terms of ownership, definitely they need that so that they can come together and work together with the different stakeholders within their particular area. And just from what we have just been saying, the dispute resolution mechanisms, we have managed to actually have at least about 24 local peace committees that have actually used this program, and they have managed to resolve some domestic marital disputes, boundary disputes, and internally family conflicts. And these results were made possible through the ECLF training efforts. And then we also have structures within the communities, like in Matobo, we have got the district focal points that are there, the local peace committee chairpersons and their committees. So they work together to make sure they achieve their objectives. And in turn now, because they have now learned how to make use of the different stakeholders for each and every activity within the communities, they make sure they have to map their stakeholders, work with them, and they make sure their things are well done within the communities. However, it doesn't mean that these local peace committees don't face some challenges. There are some challenges that they come across, like, for example, lack of resources to support their work. And also, right now, we are going towards elections. The space is shrinking for ECLF to be operating within the different areas. And also, to add on to that, you will find that the communities, they really need to work well together, but because of what we are experiencing right now, we seem to be having challenges to actually make our peace sustainable. But as it is now within the communities, we are happy because they are working, they are achieving their objectives, they have got something that they can actually talk about, to saying this program brought us this far. Thank you so much. This is the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much, John and Pam, that for really clear and enlightening presentations. Maybe we should move on in case there is anyone else with a question at the moment. We have Laurie, we have Anna, we have Martin, and we have Mary-Laure. Would any of you like to ask a question?
Maybe while we're waiting for questions, I'll just chime in here, and a few highlights from Pamidzai's presentation. I was struck by the local ownership component in Zimbabwe. That's really critical in human security, the local ownership. Very often, security as assessed from outside of communities really is a miss in terms of what would make, what would improve local security conditions. And it doesn't have to be in violent context with ongoing war. It can be in the slow violence of, the structural issues, the community discord, those kinds of things. So local ownership is key in human security. The building of trust, particularly in highly polarized political situations, contributes in a way that sometimes isn't as easy to track, but is critical nonetheless. And so these multi-stakeholder processes get people together who normally wouldn't be getting together to assess, to implement, and that builds trust in contexts that are highly polarized. And finally, I wanted to make one more point, and I think you raised this, Pamidzai, about the obligations of the security sector. you know, a lot of times things happen, whether they're human rights abuses or they are just mistakes by security sector, because they are unaware of their own obligations, whether they're international instruments, human rights charters, for example, or national policies in the case of places where there are ceasefire. The obligations of security sector in places where they do have a signed ceasefire. These are the kinds of things that multi-stakeholder processes can highlight, and it's often civil society that has to remind the security sector of these kinds of obligations.
Thank you, John. We have actually discovered that if you are to work very well within a community, that is our first port of call, to make sure we inform them of our activities. And I would have actually mentioned that before we actually make interventions within the communities, we normally bring all the stakeholders, including the security sector, to a stakeholders meeting one day before we make interventions, and actually lay out the objectives of our interventions, and so that we have a buy-in. If you get into a community, John, without those people, knowing, they can actually chase you out. So that's one thing that we have learned, to create some relationships, as you talked about, relationship building, trust building. Where we have operated, we have made it a point that we recognize the gatekeepers of each and every community. And that has actually given us a lot of strides within the community. And because we have been going to the district administrator, we have been trying even to, avoid duplication of efforts. So we are also trying, by all means, like you highlighted, joint capacity building, working with other stakeholders within the community. That has actually helped us even to protect us as a faith-based organization. So we have tried, by all means, to work with the security sector, right from the office of the president and cabinet to the communities that are there within each and every area.
And Pamita, you raise an interesting human security aspect there. Without the respect of local gatekeepers, of local authority, that is oftentimes informal, you do a great disservice, you do a great indignity to communities by not honoring that. And yet, how do outsiders know that without some kind of coordination that that informs them about who to go to, who to gain, what kinds of respect need to be given in certain contexts? Outsiders are very quick to bring that kind of indignity. And so human security with the dignity component almost demands some kind of sharing of that kind of information.
Definitely. Yes, definitely. And I also wanted to say, when you talked about the protection of civilians, when you looked at the moral, legal, political, and strategic, I just said this is exactly what we actually do. And before we get into a community, you make sure we observe the different structures that are there. And it is very strategic, and we have learned it, and even our communities, we always teach them strategic peace building, to make sure we don't step on each and everyone's toe within the communities. So that's how we even, like our local peace committees, they are local peace committees that are not very formal. They are informal within the communities themselves, because it was them that started. We just do capacity building. But when they are within the communities themselves now, the fact that they have owned the process and they are going on along with whatever is happening within the communities, now in some areas, they are now recognized structures. So that is actually put them on board. And now, even with the coming of the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission, you will find that there are some linkages that we are also trying to, put in place with them, so that at least they can actually link up with the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission that is actually on board in Zimbabwe.
Thank you, Pam. Thank you, John. Pam, I have one quick question. Also, what do you do when you have people who have absolutely no interest in joining these local peace committees, but who are also influential? Do you ever come across that? Or is everyone basically interested in joining?
Unfortunately, you will always find instances where people aren't interested in joining the committee. And it's usually an issue of the fact that they appreciate that the work of the committee might actually change the power dynamics or the status quo within the community. But from our experience, those tend to be the minority, and we do not in any way try to coerce or influence people to join the committee. It usually happens on its own as they get to, witness the work that is being done and the transformation that's happening in the communities. They gradually either totally back down or eventually, join the bandwagon. So for the time being, it's more or less a wait and see. We just let people change as and when they feel they want to participate, but we don't have any direct influence or coercion on it.
Thank you, Suko. I will also add to say, I just want to add and say, the local peace committees, we don't influence them. They are the community members who choose amongst themselves. So they know each other. And all what we do is once they have chosen, then we come in now to build their capacity with their terms of reference, just to help them, teach them strategic peace building. How can they move forward now that they have got those structures? So that's what we normally do. I will tell you, amongst all the good apples, there's always a bad apple. But amongst themselves, they know each other. That's why we say, let's have, if there are 3 or 4 different political parties within an area, we usually like to have them involved so that they can identify them and they are together. So that if there's a bad apple in one political party, the person who is in the committee can actually try to help within that as well.
Thank you very much. That was actually really encouraging and positive as responses. Is there anyone else who would like to ask a question now? Marie-Laure, Martin, Laurie,
There's
Anna?
a written one from Martine.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Martin,
Here, Martin
yes.
asks, how can we change the paradigm of the stark, hard security approaches towards human security processes?
And
John, would you like to start with an answer on that?
Right. That is the key question, isn't it? I think the strategic starting point there is to find those in the security sector who really are tired of the existing hard power security paradigm. And believe me, they're everywhere. You will find commanders in the military, police, in the police forces, who are saying, what we're doing is not working, we're not getting results. So you have to find those people, as John Paul Lederach calls them, the strategic who. Who are the people who are A, frustrated with the current methodologies and are looking for something new, and B, are open to kind of crossing over and actually asking civil society, so what can we do? Do you have any new ideas, or at least are willing to join some kind of a multi-stakeholder process whereby the brainstorming phase of looking at all the security challenges, maybe it's just early communication and trust building, maybe it's a little bit later in joint analysis. There are people in all of those realms, and that is why these chasms between civil society and some of the security sector have been such a disservice because we don't have those natural connection points, and that's the first place to start. I hope that helps, Martin.
Okay, can I also come in?
Thank you.
Can I come
Yes,
in, Lucy?
please.
I want to exemplify
Yes, of
that
course.
in Southern Africa, we have had some workshops where we in Lesotho and Zambia, where we actually invited the security sector, the military, the OPC, and then the police themselves and the different political parties. They were part and parcel of the workshops. You know, believe me, they actually said this handbook is very critical. They want to use it. So we have actually seen that at times it's good that using these multi-stakeholders processes, if it's possible that we identify those individuals, especially at regional level. If we are going like we are going to Swaziland, then we make sure we once had a workshop in Swaziland, and they also invited their top officials from the security sector. They also appreciated the program as well. So I want to say to Martin, if at all is going to be possible, is to make sure they organize a workshop for them. We have actually done that with the police. We have done that with the prison services as well. And you'll find that with the heads of Christian denominations, they have been working from track 1 level. With us as ECLF, we have been working more on track 2 and track 3 levels. So we were just trying to influence the processes from there so that we can reach to the track 1 at national level. So I want to believe she can actually try to work with the, you know, from the levels. I don't know which level she's operating from, but it could actually help because they always give reports to the people at the top. Then the message can be heard from there.
And I would add one more thing to that usually in terms of military, the civil military affairs people, those are the people who know how to talk to civil society. Those are the people who are tasked with liaising with civil society, with communities. And you might find more of an openness there and an ability to kind of cross these chasms that we've created between sectors in the CIMIC people. And that would be the first place to start if you are looking for people in the security sector.
Okay.
Well, thank you both very much for that. You make it clear that multi-stakeholder processes are really the key to transformation and to bridging the chasms that you mentioned. Are there any further questions?
Yes, actually, this is Nick from GPPAC. I have a question myself. First of all, thank you very much, Hamidzai and
great.
Jonathan, for offering your for presenting on very interesting topics, and Lucy for moderating. Hamidzai, you mentioned in your presentation the challenges of a shrinking political space for civil society to engage in a multi-stakeholder process. I was just wondering what kind of approaches do you recommend in a context in which you have you want to promote multi-stakeholder processes, but for civil society they're being hampered or threatened by perhaps security actors or other actors with the work they're doing? How do you promote human security approaches while at the same time ensuring that space is still there for civil society? Thank you.
I'm Sue with Pamitsai. You're actually asking a question that we've been asking ourselves as well. The context in Zimbabwe is a bit different in the sense that most of the time space is totally open. But we've realized that as we approach the election period, everything seems to just clamp up and totally shut down. And our thinking is that probably it's a case where the actors that we deal with, state and national security, probably have not been really converted or convinced to adopt the human security approach. Hence, probably their need to constantly revert back to, the state security model where, you have to clamp down on people in order to protect your interests. So for us, I think it probably is an issue of not only working in the communities, but probably to find strategies where we can actually penetrate at the highest national levels and probably actually get that total buy-in and have people convinced that, you can have a broader approach without having to exercise your security muscle in order to get people to, to conform. So for us, it's still a learning curve, and we'd actually appreciate insights from countries who've actually managed to penetrate in that level and get that buy-in at the highest levels.
Thank you, Suku. And I also talk about the reason why we also are emphasizing on the local peace committees and capacity building them, so that when times like this are found, then the local peace committees, they are actually there to withstand this pressure and they can maintain their peace, even if we cannot go to the communities. So at times you find that not everywhere, we may fail to go to the communities, but the local peace committees, they are still functioning. So they are now acting as our early warning systems. We can actually use the group chats, they can be giving us feedback. So that's why we were very busy within the communities to make sure we have actually got the local peace committees at district level. We have local peace committees at ward level, even up to village level. So that is how we have managed to actually manage that situation. That at this moment, even if we are in the offices, but information will always be coming. And then we are saying at least we can give them space. Because like now, they are busy. Most of the times, there are these campaign periods. So the same communities that we normally go out to are the ones who are actually having this campaign period. It's actually going on very much. So we actually say to ourselves, we can actually pack a bit whilst they finish that process and then continue. But feedback will be having the feedback.
Thank you, Suko. Thank you, Pam. Really strong, encouragement for local peace committees to push back, to reclaim that shrinking civic space. If, the stronger the local ownership and the local structures, the more it should be possible to build human security in the face of state security that won't let go, or that's taking over too much. So thank you very much, all of you. I don't know if John or Pam, you would like a final word?
Yes, I would like to add and say, in some areas right now, some communities, even if the space is not there, some communities have fought very hard and they are even doing what we call self-funded workshops. At times we do fund the workshops and help them so that they can come together. Now they are even inviting us to saying, come and capacity build us. So that is also encouraging on us, and it shows how the communities have actually owned the process. They mobilize themselves, then they invite us to come and just give capacity building. To us, it's just a plus on us because we have been to the communities. Now they are inviting us instead of us to actually say, for now we don't have the resources. They are busy mobilizing each other and they just want the skills to manage conflicts within the communities. Thank you so much. It was quite a pleasure to have us as ECLF so that we can share with you how we are doing it within the communities. Anybody who wants to learn more, the address is there, then we can always get in touch. Thank you so much.
And just from me, final words, I think there is a tremendous thirst for this kind of shift in security paradigm. And I think there's a tremendous amount of frustration that, that things aren't shifting fast enough. I think this resource that's made available through GPPAC, through Alliance for Peace Building, through the CROC, those are the three sponsors of this this handbook on human security and the case studies. I think this is something that needs to be disseminated, and I think the uptake of it in both the security sector and civil society is tremendous. So please circulate all of that, those of you who do have connections in all of those sectors. So thank you very much for listening, and it's been a pleasure to be part of this.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Nick?
Yes, I'm here.
Hello? Yeah. Thank you so much for managing all of this. And thank you again, John and Pam, for your presentations and for your upbeat final words. And thank you all, Marie-Laure, Martin, Laurie, Gabriella, and Anna, for your participation and for joining us in this first webinar for the Improving Practice Working Group of GPPAC. Till next time, thank you very much.